Okay, well, why don't we get started now? As I said, I'm Judy Burlfine. I'm a member of the Jewish Earth Alliance Steering Committee, and I live just north of San Diego. We aim to finish this meeting at the top of the hour. We have a full program, so it's possible we'll go 5 or 10 minutes over. We want to make sure everyone completes an action reaching out to their senator. And to give you an overview, we will start with a reflection, then report on the results of our successful lobby day, hear from our speaker, have do some Q&A after the speaker, and then do an action. So now I would like to introduce Rabbi Adam Fisher, who will provide a reflection to begin the meeting. Rabbi Fisher served as rabbi of Temple Isaiah in Stony Brook, New York from 1971 to 2002. In addition, Rabbi Fisher is a writer, a poet, and the author of 2 books of liturgy. These include Seder Tu B'Shvat, the Festival of the Trees, which is most appropriate as we just completed our Tu B'Shvat lobby day, as well as An Everlasting Name, a service for remembering the Shoah. Thank you, Rabbi Fisher, for joining us. Please go ahead.
It's certainly nice to be here with everyone. The Tu B'Shvat is really a very minor holiday, and when I was in 1988, I think it was I was a member of the liturgy committee of the CCAR, and I remember being asked, the group was asked, anybody want to do a service for Tu B'Shvat? So you never volunteer for anything, but I was foolish enough to volunteer, and I did a service for Tu B'Shvat, which was much more involved than they thought. They expected a little pamphlet or a couple of pages, and I gave them a whole book. And my motivation in the book was to try to reclaim Jewish sources as much as possible, because it's in liturgy, Jews see the Jewish sources, and in the most of the time. So the book includes not only my own writing, but a lot of sources as well. Tu B'Shvat really started out as a Rosh Hashanah for trees, a New Year for trees, which was a kind of a taxation date on which trees would be the first fruits of trees would be taxed, and so it existed that way uh, for many centuries, and was really existed uh, importantly during the time of the temple, but it became really moribund later on after the temple was destroyed, and people no longer observed those kinds of things, those taxation days. And then it was later on, with the 15th, 14th, 15th, 16th century, that the mystics rediscovered Tu B'Shvat. They saw in it as a festival for trees, the inverted divine tree of the Sfirot, which starts generally at the top with Ein Sof, which is God as unknowable, and then it trickles down through various Chachma, Bina, and Tiferet, and so on, all the way down to Malchut, the Shechina, which is where human beings can then interface with God. And so that was the reclamation of Tu B'Shvat, and they published a Tu B'Shvat Seder for their time, that was mainly emphasizing the the mystical aspects of the Sefirot and Tu B'Shvat. Later on, with the establishment of Israel, Tu B'Shvat now became an important day because of the reclamation of the land and the planting of trees to reclaim the land. And if you go to the to Haifa and you go up on the mountain, you could just see a tremendous forest of evergreen trees up there. It's really quite beautiful. And then later on, Tu B'Shvat develops another layer, which is the ecological movement, which was prominent here and in other places in the world. And that's another layer. Throughout the entire uh, uh, Seder, from the beginnings until throughout the various stages of its development, there is the sense of the wonders of the planet. And these wonders are included in the early morning blessings that are said every day of about the world. And the awe begins with the amazing fact that the Earth is the only planet that we know of in the entire universe that supports this kind of life. And if there was a movie in which what's her first name, Bullock, appears, and she has has had a hard time trying to get back to Earth from outer space. And when she finally splashes down, the movie turns technicolor, and she drags herself up on the beach in the most amazing, lush island. And you realize for the first time what a unique situation this is with oxygen to breathe, with plants growing, with a sea. It's just amazing. And of course, our planet is amazing and it's unique. The other, but there are other aspects of of Jewish life. The flowers, the fruit on the trees, the animals with fur that adopts to the seasons. After all, if you I remember walking my daughter's dog, and he doesn't seem to be cold when it was outside, and he seemed to be fine inside where it was warm. And the animals have a tremendous ability to adapt to the weather, to the changes of the weather. The deer who live outside during the winter develop a coat which now protects them, and the whole thing is astonishing. The ability, our ability to see with the which is just extraordinary. I'm gradually losing my ability to read. At least I have macular degeneration, and the ability to see has become just astonishing to me. The ability to hear, which is enshrined in the early morning blessing, uh, is also quite amazing. So the human body, our ability to breathe, and the heartbeat, and the whole function of the body with its tremendous intricacy is, without us even thinking about it, is also a matter of awe and wonder. So we are and we live in a place that is a place of great wonder. And according to Heschel, that was the gateway to a sense of God's presence in the world. And we can take this world as either just something that happened as a matter of chance, and that we can investigate through scientific uh, means, uh, or we can look upon it as the creation of Hayei Ha'olamim, the life of the world, God, and we have a choice whether we can have one or the other. But to Seder Tu B'Shvat, which is a celebration of Tu B'Shvat, is becomes a Haggadah, so to speak, for the eve of Tu B'Shvat, which has it has an adult section, it has a section for children, and so on. But and it goes, as I've said, it goes through various stages of development in Jewish life and in Jewish history. But underlying all of that
Rabbi
is,
Fisher, sorry to interrupt. We have a full program ahead. I wonder if you have any
yeah,
last words.
what I was going to say is just as a conclusion is that the whole Seder and the whole book and the holiday is all about awe at the nature of our world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Fisher, for the history and perspective on Tu B'Shvat. We're appreciative. Now we're going to move to Phyllis from our steering committee, who did an amazing job of organizing our lobby day, and she will now share with us the results of all of our efforts. Phyllis.
Hi, I'm Phyllis Blumberg, and I was the Lobby Day chair for a most amazing Lobby Day. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we have gone from strength to strength. We have done amazing things over the years, and we keep getting better and better. We had 359 people registered to lobby. We had returnees. We had new people lobbying, and every time we lobby, we get more registrants, we get more states, we get more meetings. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we now have more than half of that. We've met with more than half of the senators. And we have a nice diversity of participants representing many Jewish communities. So we have really enlarged our presence, and we've also diversified, which is great. We had 31 states represented and 53 meetings with staff, 34 Democrats and 19 Republicans. So if you think about it, at the end of February 3rd, 2026, more than half of the senators in the United States heard from us and heard from us on several topics, and heard from us about things that they probably were not even aware of, because these are bills that haven't gotten a lot of notice, and we were educating them. And I just think that was a fabulous thing that we all did. So this is my thank you, thank you, thank you. And we had 46 co-sponsors. These are organizations, either national or local organizations of all ilks of Judaism, from religious to totally secular to activists to whatever. And our co-sponsors helped us to pull so many people out. They did an awful lot of recruiting, and they did an advertising for us. So this is the second page for us. I know the print may be too much to take in. I just want to say that this is every year we get some more people to be more organizations to co-sponsor us, and we're always happy to have them join us. The steering committee did an amazing job, from recruitment to scheduling meetings to developing of talking points um, to everything in between. And they also attended lots of extra meetings. So I just want to acknowledge everybody on the steering committee and these people, particularly who recruited people was Mirala Goldsmith, Melanie Aaron, Deborah Lynn. Recruiting leads was Melanie Aaron and Barak Gale. And our newsletters and announcements came from Elliot Rubin and Amy Dick. Amy is the most amazing scheduler. She is so tenacious. She gets every meeting scheduled. Our talking points, which people said was very well received, came from Debbie Schwank and Amy Dick. Barak Gale did lead training, and then all of us attended extra meetings. This is the first time that we went beyond our steering committee with people who really reached out and helped us out. We had 3 interns this year, 2 of whom were from Adama's youth group or college group. We had one from sophomore college. That was Rose Lawrence, Anna Sattler, and Camille Yos. Bill Witherspoon, who used to be in our steering committee, now is just doing an amazing job of all the data management with a huge amount of spreadsheets that worked so well. They were all interconnected. Deb Nam Crane did outreach to organizations. Morgan Long did a lot of social media for us, and the social media really paid off. We had a huge contingent of Reform rabbis from small Jewish communities, and they were absolutely wonderful. So I'm saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And we also want to thank our co-sponsors again. They also did research. They recruited a lot of people. So what did we hear from our participants? Most felt that lobbying day was effective. It was impactful, but because we were informing the senators' offices about not top of the mind issues, it was very hard for us to determine whether or not we would have any impact. But I want to just say educating staffers is a very legitimate role for us, and it's very definitely impactful, especially when we figure that we spoke to more than half the senators' offices that day. Because for some people, we've been meeting with them over the years. We're now building relationship with the staff. Amy tells us that we have name recognition when she calls up to make appointments, and the staff generally appreciated meeting with us. Even if they didn't agree with us, they were very happy to hear our points of view. And we asked people if they want to be more involved in our Speakers Bureau and if they want to be more involved with Jewish Earth Alliance, and we will be getting back to you. I just want to say, if you have any organization that you would love to work with, this is the organization that you want to join, because and this is just an amazing organization that works really hard, and we get along really well. We help each other out. It's really a pleasure. We do want to ask people, if you haven't filled out the feedback form, to please complete that. And if someone could put that in the chat, that would be great. We ask everybody who participated to complete the feedback form. And then we're also asking leads to complete the lead form, or somebody else from that group can complete it, and to submit the pictures. So that goes from, we will continue going from strength to strength. We will be lobbying again in July. And I just want to end with, be strong and courageous in these very tough times. And every day we hear worse news. And this, I know the endangerment finding being thrown out was a real hard one for me. But we have to be strong, we have to be courageous, and we have to keep the fight going, because together we will make progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. So impressive, and I second what Phyllis says. This is a wonderful group of people to work with. Really amazing, hardworking. It's amazing how, when you have an all-volunteer organization, how much people are open and excited to do. So now I want to call on Jack Gorman, who is from our policy committee, to introduce our speaker, Alex Craven. But first, I want to remind folks, if you have questions while the speaker is presenting, please put them in the chat and we will do our best to get to them during the Q&A. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So as you know, tonight we're going to discuss the use of public lands, and we are really happy today to truly have a man who knows his way around forests and public lands to talk with us about that. Alex Craven is Sierra Club's forest campaign manager, and in that role, he advances strong conservation policies for forested public lands overseen by both the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management through grassroots organizing, partnership development, and advocacy. Alex spent roughly a decade in the evergreen ecosystems of the Pacific Northwest before returning to the northeastern hardwoods in his home state of Vermont, where he's speaking to us from today. Prior to his time with Sierra Club, Alex worked in the U.S. Senate on a portfolio that ranged from housing to higher education. So welcome to Jewish Earth Alliance, Alex Craven.
All right. Jack, thank you very much for the invitation to join. I'm really pleased to be here speaking with you all this evening. And I just want to start with a nod to both Phyllis and Rabbi Fisher on some themes that I think you both did a wonderful job of teeing up that I'm going to continue to build off of. And Phyllis spoke about the strength of volunteer organizing and of having relationships with offices, and that's something that factors into my work on a daily basis, particularly around connecting people with the offices that represent them and making sure the constituent voices are heard on these issues. And then I'm really going to key off of Rabbi Fisher speaking to the wonders of the planet and the all of our world as just central tenets for motivating this kind of work that I feel very fortunate to be able to do on a daily basis. So as Jack had mentioned, my work at Sierra Club is Forest Campaign Manager. There are a handful of different portfolios, water, wildlife, and a variety of others that are managed by my colleagues. And mine really focuses on, as mentioned, the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management and any of these federal lands in particular that have forested ecosystems on them. So for those who are unfamiliar, a quick note about Sierra Club. For a decade or a century and a quarter, rather, Sierra Club has been one of the primary environmental organizations. And the bread and butter of how Sierra Club has operated has been through movement organizing. So getting people to speak up and talk about what matters to them and get activated around particularly public lands protection has been one of our longest running efforts to date. So everything from the creation of the National Park Service and some of the earliest national parks to things like the Roadless Area, which I'll be talking about this evening. And just to give you a snapshot of what I hope to cover, I'll give an update on public lands in 2026 and how that differs from 2025 and prior. Roadless forests, policies for protecting roadless forests, including, you'll hear me talk a lot about Roadless Area Conservation Rule and then the Roadless Area Conservation Act, and I'll get into what the difference and distinction is there. And then, as I think is the centerpiece of what we're doing here tonight, what you all can do about that. And so we'll also have some room at the end to talk about questions, as Judy had mentioned. So I'll give a snapshot of public lands in this current moment. So across the board, the biggest threat to public lands is privatization. And it's coming in a variety of different flavors, but for really the first time in at least a half a century, and certainly in a bigger way than we've maybe ever seen before, public lands are under threat of no longer being public. And the way that we are seeing that is this administration has pushed forward proposals to be selling off public lands entirely, title and deed gone, no longer in the public estate, and has also been pushing forward a variety of different restructures, reorganizations, DOGE cuts that take aim at the federal agencies and also ultimately limit their efficacy and actually being able to perform the management responsibilities that the American public expects them to fulfill. And so that's really a key component to understand as we go into this is that we are in uncharted territory in some ways. And I don't mean that to sound alarming, but I mean that to say that we ought to be taking seriously the threats that we are facing and really knowing that public lands as we have conceived of them for the last many centuries is now going to be something that we have to fight even harder for. And when I'm talking about public lands, I think folks are probably aware, but I'll just risk being remedial here and saying that these are lands that are owned collectively by the American public and managed by federal agencies. So Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Those are the big players in that sphere of public lands management. And the acreage totals something like 500 million acres across the United States. So it's a large portfolio. The work they do is really important. And because these are the places that have been conserved for, at the very least, multiple uses and managed with a collective mentality, they tend to be the best preserved ecosystems that are left across the continent. And what we're seeing now is maybe best illustrated by a bill that came out from Senator Mike Lee from Utah in June of last year, which had proposed to sell outright public lands. And I think that got people and recognizing the issue and having this in public consciousness in a way that it has not been for quite some time. We were fortunate to win that one. So talk about strength on strength. We're coming from a moment of when people understood what the stakes were, they stood up and they said, no, this is not how we want to see these places managed. We're not trying to make a quick buck. We're trying to save these landscapes for time immemorial and for future generations. And so when you think about public lands, generally you're probably not thinking about like oil derricks and timber sales and how you would get revenue from these places. What you probably think of when you have a mental image of public lands is intact landscapes, national parks, vistas, outdoor recreation, hunting and fishing, all of these other uses that are impacted by those extractive industries. And so I think arguably, maybe chief among those places, chief among the public lands that are like pinnacle public lands, would be our roadless forests. And if you haven't heard of roadless forests, you are probably in the majority, but I think this is one of the most underappreciated aspects of public lands conservation that is out there right now. And so roadless forests are what they sound like. It represents about 1/3 of the U.S. Forest System's, U.S. Forest Service's landscape. So out of 193 million acres across the continental U.S. And Alaska and Puerto Rico, there is about 54.5 million acres of that, which is considered inventoried roadless areas. And I won't get too deep into the history of what the IRAs are, but suffice to say, inventoried roadless areas are the areas that did not get developed and impacted over the last century of management by the U.S. Forest Service. So they were not clear-cut logged. They did not have wildfire suppression. They did not have any other extractive industries like mining, drilling, fracking, you name it. Dam building for the most part. So these are really the core intact landscapes within the National Forest System. And for the most part, there was really good reason that that these were not areas that extraction was ultimately the management goal. It's because they're hard to reach, they're wild, they are generally the more rugged of the public lands that we have left. They're often called the best of what's left. And the values that these places have are things like abundant wildlife. They're key for clean drinking water, clean water for salmon, because the roadless areas tend to be higher up in watersheds, so higher elevation and higher up in these stream basins. That is where, by preserving these, you're preserving all of the downstream benefit of clean water. So clean drinking water for communities, clean drinking water for fish. They also provide significant connectivity for species, and then also reference conditions, which is a little bit nerdier and wonkier, but basically these are the last places that look like this that we have left. And while the biggest parcels are in the west, and I'm going to queue up my map here in just a minute if Amy can help me out on the tech side. While the biggest parcels of roadless areas are in the west, Uh, the smaller parcels in the east are arguably, and this comes from the chief of the Forest Service, Mike Dombeck, in 2000 when the policy was created, are almost more important because so much of the eastern landscape is private that the conservation burden, as it's been put, is very much on the federal landscape. And because there's a much longer history of management on these forests, the roadless areas are relatively small. So because they are so small and so rare, conservation of the eastern forests in some ways is, as important, more important than the western counterparts, which tend to get more attention. And speaking of values from the U.S. Forest Service, thank you, Amy. In 2000, the Forest Service was at a moment in time where they were facing a significant financial backlog, about $8 billion. They had a road system that was 380,000 miles of roads, which is considerably more than the Federal Highway Administration. And so this is all sorts of switchback gravel roads that is just a lattice work or a pile of spaghetti all over the National Forest System. And that road system is expensive to build and the road system is expensive to maintain. And so partially through financial motives, partially through the ecological values, and partially through the general popularity of conserving these wild places, the Forest Service led a very robust process to create what it termed the Roadless Area Conservation Rule. Ultimately, what they decided on after 18 months of deliberation, 600 public meetings, and 1 million comments, 97% of which supported a full roadless protection, was that they were going to deliver full protection for these roadless areas. So there, with very limited exceptions, any area that did not have a road would not have then a future road built into it. And so that brings us to where we are today, which is after 25 years of this policy being not just one of the most successful conservation policies of the Forest Service, but I think one of the most successful conservation policies in the history of the country. And the values that underpin it, again, fiscal responsibility, socially popular, ecologically important, none of that has changed. If anything, we can look back at the folks who created the roadless rule and think that they were ahead of their time to put together something so visionary that we continue to benefit from. That brings us to about, I think, June of last year when U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that they would be rescinding the roadless rule and basically dialing that from 100% down to zero. They'd done some version of this in the first administration, in the first term of Trump, I should say, that was a repeal just for the Tongass National Forest in Alaska, which is by far the biggest national forest and by far the biggest area of roadless national forest. This time it was not just Alaska. This is all the national forests across the United States. Wherever roadless areas exist, they would be repealed. That is the proposal we continue to face. And we're coming up on a draft EIS, draft environmental impact statement and comment period that's going to be happening later this spring, probably in about a month or two. I mentioned that as an important keep your eyes peeled moment, but that's not what we're here to do today for inaction. And because of the threat of the repeal of the Roadless Area Conservation Rule, there is an even greater weight that is on another policy that is why we are here to talk, and that's the Roadless Area Conservation Act. And so for those who are unfamiliar, the Roadless Area Conservation Rule, since it was an administrative policy promulgated under then President Bill Clinton, that is subject to the whims of future administrations in a way that's even easier to dispute than monuments, as we've seen in the last couple of years. And the way to protect not just roadless areas themselves, but to protect the policy that protects roadless areas is by codifying the Roadless Area Conservation Rule. And so that would be done through the Roadless Area Conservation Act. That is a bill that's at least 2 decades old at this stage and has been introduced every Congress in that time period. And it would codify the Roadless Area Conservation Rule, and it would establish that these protections would then be legislated and not subject to future repeals. that was a good idea every time it had been introduced each year for the last 20 plus years. It's especially important now because without a roadless area conservation rule, we stand to have absolutely zero protections for some of these last wild remaining places on the national forest system. So that puts the values that we're talking about back in jeopardy. Wildlife, clean water, increased risk of fire, more degradation to the ecosystem from roads, and at the same time does indeed bump up the Forest Service's budget woes, which have not really gotten a whole lot better in the last 25 years. So it's going to be costly in more ways than one. And so what folks tonight could do is to encourage your member of Congress to sign on and support. I'll give you one of three things. One, sign on and support Roadless Area Conservation Act. Two, is decry the repeal of the Roadless Area Conservation Rule by the administration. And then three is to call out the administration for putting forward a process that completely pales in comparison to the initial process that was used to create the rule. So we had a good policy with good process, and now we're getting bad policy with almost zilch in terms of actual public engagement. And so as the public and as the co-owners of these places, it's really important that the American populace has a say in how they're managed. And I'll just make one more note here, which is that I mentioned that 97% of people supported the creation of the roadless rule of that 1 million who commented. When Sierra Club and our partners worked on the first comment period for fighting back on the repeal of the roadless area conservation rule, that number went up to 99. So 99% of the people, and again, close to 1 million, who weighed in on this said it is a bad idea to remove these protections for these landscapes. And with that, I think I'm right about at my time, so I will stop and leave opportunity for question and answers.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. And now I'm going to hand it over to Marion Dressner from Oregon. Thank you. And do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we had quite a few questions. The first one is, besides the three actions you just listed, what are effective actions to protect mature and old growth forests?
Oh, that is a great question. We went through quite a back and forth on this during the Biden administration, trying to pass what was called a National Old Growth Amendment, and that would have functioned similar to the roadless rule in that it would have said that the oldest tier of forest, the oldest trees in any particular area on any national forest, are deserving of protections. We shouldn't see cutting of these old growth forests for some short-term financial gain as a good solution for how we manage forests. And so we can manage forests for a lot of things, ecosystems, clean water, wildlife, but you can manage for all of those things at the same time. But when you start managing for timber, you manage for timber. That's it. And so we have really pushed hard, and frankly, after we get the roadless rule protections, because this is popular, this is the right thing to do, we're going to keep at this one. After that is reestablished, the next thing on the radar is getting old growth protections. So thank you for that question.
Right. Right. So someone wanted to know if how can Congress stop the privatization of public lands?
A very good question and a very timely one. So I mentioned Senator Mike Lee's bill that came out last June. Congress did stop the first, I'll call it the opening salvo of privatization of public lands. And I think because the public reacted so strongly to this idea of loss of something that they co-own collectively, then especially something that is tied to identity, that was something that was incredibly resonant to members of Congress. Credit where due, a public lands caucus came together within the House that included members from both Democrat and Republican sides of the aisle. And that caucus brought together enough Republicans to oppose the idea and say, this isn't the right course of action. And it established that common denominator of we're not going to sell off public lands. I think that that's good. We need to hold everybody to that common denominator of privatization is a final decision. We don't get to unmake that one. And we need to keep ratcheting that up in the direction of renting public lands for extractive companies is not a whole lot better than selling them. It keeps it in the public hands, but we can do better than that, and we need to keep that as the guiding principle.
Someone wanted to know, since there's a big difference between protection of national parks and forest lands, why forests are more vulnerable than national parks?
Yes. So I think the easiest way to just like conceptualize this, U.S. Forest Service is within the Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture, agriculture grows crops. Forest Service, the establishment of that was forest as a natural resource being something that we conserve, that we can make money off of, that we can, ensure that is stewarded for the future. So just a quick look backwards. When the U.S. Forest Service was created in around 1905, part of the motivation was to ensure that the abuse of federal lands, especially in the West, would be stopped. And so there's a really gallant goal to the creation of, an entity that manages these landscapes. I think that has gotten skewed in the direction, and partially by law of, for national forests are managed for multiple use. And so again, that looks like timber, wildlife, outdoor recreation, you name it. That's all baked into the management of a national forest and then in the national forest system. National parks within Department of Interior, separate from Department of Agriculture, were created as, these are the places that we're going to designate as parks. We agree that they are, iconic American landscapes, period. There's a little more complexity to that, but I think for this question, that's basically the way to look at it, is that the Forest Service is mandated to have some level of board foot yield, which is a fancy way of saying timber, some level of timber production on the landscape. But where they do that is really key. And the roadless rule has, in one sense, focused their management into places that they've already managed, or places that they've already clear cut, or places that they've already done fire suppression. And it sets off the areas where they haven't done that and says, these places are too special. There's no replacing that.
Yeah. So the administration seems to respond when there's a big published pushback. So besides the action we're going to take in a little bit of emailing or calling our representatives, how do you think we can provide more pushback about the vulnerability of these roadless areas?
I think there is a lot happening right now, so I just want to say that there are many issues that we are all working on, and clearly that JEA is already working on. So determining what issue gets what percent of one's time is a challenge at the moment. And I think that any tool that you have at your disposal, and for those who are particularly invested in forest work, this is priority number one for my world. And any tool that you have at your disposal is a good one to use. I think I'll just rattle off a few. The pushing of congressional offices is one that we know the administration is probably not going to take us very seriously in a comment period. If 99% of people and almost 1 million people weigh in, and that doesn't move the needle very much, that's a challenge. So we need to be looking at other avenues like Congress and Roadless Area Conservation Act to be protecting these landscapes. And then as far as the tactics that support that, kind of the brass tacks, letters to the editor, op-eds, doing local meetings and gatherings, outings, because it's also nice to have fun while you're doing organizing work. All of those things are important and have a real service to them. And I'll just say one thing that always sticks with me is a colleague had the line of all organizing is education. And so I think there is an element that we always need to be finding new audiences to be talking to our issues about.
Okay, great. Somebody asked about the relationship between indigenous people and roadless area parcels.
Yeah. Wherever there are national forests, there were indigenous people. Wherever there are roadless areas, there were indigenous people. So when I should clarify my language here, that when I'm referring to um, areas that are undeveloped or have not seen management, I'm specifically referring to federal management. Um, and the practices of indigenous people that are oriented towards respect for the landscape, that's different. That is not what we have seen as far as a um, driving principle of federal land management by and large. And wherever you point to on a map, there is going to be indigenous people with connections to these landscapes.
So this administration is not targeting tribal lands.
Not specifically, no, but they are very much ignoring tribal input. And so what I mean by that is I'll use the Tongass example again, is in 2017 when Trump had hashed out the idea to remove the roadless rule for the state of Alaska, um, which, by the way, was a deal that was just literally negotiated on the tarmac with the governor of Alaska at an airport. That was the genesis of the policy. So that was the moment where we started to see a very strong pushback from a number of tribal villages around Southeast Alaska and the Tongass, with a lot of really strong tribal leadership and support of that tribal leadership. And it was largely dismissed, and we're still in the process of the administration's repeal of the roadless area conservation rule writ large now, but there are certainly echoes of that already.
I'm going to jump in here because we're getting near the end of our time. So I want to thank you, Marion, for asking the questions and Alex for presenting. And now is our chance and opportunity to take action ourselves. So let's see. Okay, well, we just had a wonderful talk from Alex. There are our unspoiled forests. I don't know if these are fully unspoiled. Looks like there's some patches there, trees that were maybe cut down at one point. So next slide, Amy. I'm going to do a quick summary of what we just heard from Alex so that we can write to our senators. So the Roadless Area Conservation Rule shields 45 million acres of national forests from logging and other development. And as Alex told us, Trump is aiming to rescind that rule. But the Roadless Area Conservation Act of 2025 has been introduced in both the House and Senate to codify the roadless rule into law. And that's the only thing that's going to allow us to hold on to that. And those are the numbers of the Senate bill and the House bill. Okay, next slide. Public lands offer a myriad of benefits, and keep these in mind when you're writing your emails or calling your senators. They preserve wildlife habitats. They can support tourism and outdoor recreational opportunities, something that if you have a Republican House or Senate member might be more important to them than some of the other things we're discussing. They help maintain clean watersheds and improve air quality. And I'll also stress that when Republicans are anxious about talking about climate change, they seem happy to talk about clean air and clean water. So these are important benefits of the roadless areas. And they stabilize the climate by capturing and storing carbon dioxide. And what I also learned from Marion Dressner is they decrease risk of wildfires by keeping forests intact rather than allowing them to dry out along the edges. So we're going to take action now, and you can either call your senator at this phone number or look up their website, their last name.senate.gov. Most of you have been here before and done this before, and look for some sort of contact button. And after this call, we hope that you will also write to your House member, since their bills have been introduced in both places. And we'll put the phone number in the chat. And the next slide is a sample letter, sample message that you, in the subject line, if you're writing to your senator, you support S2042. And if you're writing to your House member, HR 3930. I am dismayed by the USDA Forest Service's action to rescind the Roadless Area Conservation Rule. Without it, tens of millions of acres of priceless forest land, including the Tongass National Forest, will be open to logging and development. Preserving the roadless rule provides economic benefits through tourism and outdoor recreation. It also serves to keep our air and water clean and stabilize our climate. Please co-sponsor S2042 in the Senate and HR 3930 in the House of Representatives. If you want to add a personal story and how Judaism impacts your perspective, that's always wonderful. And as I mentioned, you can tailor your message depending on whether you have a Democrat or Republican, what you think they will hear the best. So we'll keep this message up on the screen and keep posting the phone number for the Senate office in the chat. We'll even copy this message into the chat. And if you have any questions, speak up. Perfect. Thank you. And we'll give you 5 minutes before the hour if you want to take 5 to 10 minutes to do this. Once you've completed, please let us know in the chat that you contacted your senator. And if you have any questions about how to find your House member, we can help you. Thank you. Nicole, I will give you the phone number. If you're in Canada,
I apologize, we don't have our set up yet for lobbying in Canada, but if there's a committee willing to help us, we'd be open to that.
Well, many of you have finished, and some of you are still hard at work. And I'm in California, but lots of you are on the other side of the country, and I know it's getting late there, so I'm going to wind things down. Thank you, Rabbi Fisher. Thank you, Alex Craven. Very informative meeting. For those of you who are here for the first time, thank you for joining us. And for those of you who lobbied, it's sometimes hard to stay in the fight, as Phyllis says. But the more we work together, the more hopeful and more possibility there is. So I hope you'll come back. March is the same as February, unless it's a leap year. So same day, same date, same time. We do this every month, and it's good to come together for inspiration and for education. And someone said something recently about education that I was like, that's important. I want to remember that whenever we can get in front of a new audience, because there's so much going on that most people are fairly oblivious to. So have a good evening, and thank you for joining us.